So we ended our last segment by saying that there's a need for simpler tools and processes. And that's around three key aspects of our BIM delivery approach. How we create and collate data, how we validate and verify that data, then how we transform and transfer that data. Because we're talking now about the example of asset information, how do we transfer that data into the asset information system, CAFM, however you might describe it. So as that being the basis, what I'd like to do is go through an example of each aspect of those processes. When it comes to creating and collating the asset data, if I'm in a tier 3 or tier 4 position, perhaps it's easier for me to think about exporting and importing the data between Revit and Excel. I'll assume that the other tiers of the supply chain, for instance, the electrical subcontractor, would take responsibility for the modeling side of this. I, of course, might still have the capability and probably would have the capability of generating the drawings. But in terms of the asset information, I need some way of being able to communicate into a tool like Excel, a spreadsheet, which allows me to put those values in and then for those values to be transferred into Revit. Now, there are some on the market there. I can promise you they're around £60 per year as an annual license fee, so they're not prohibitive. Given the fact that the exported data that is given to me by the person further up in the supply chain needs to be separated in worker packages, I probably are going to need MS Office and a 5-user license of that. And then I need to think about the potential and the requirement for this to be accessible to others without having to open Excel every time they want to make a change. And one way of doing that is to use SharePoint. Now, again, looking at some of the prices there, they're not prohibitive. And I'm just going to look at this example of creating and collect asset data because I think it shows you how you can disrupt what's known as the conventional way of doing this, which is having some cloud-based tool set, which can be quite expensive. Okay, so let's have a look first at the spreadsheet. There we have it. Here's an example of an spreadsheet exported. I use RF tools for doing this. This is, again, the data set is public domain, but it gives you an example of the way that we can filter the information by level. We can filter it by space, as you can see here. But the truth is that I would prefer this information to be accessible via a common platform. And the way to do that is to use what's known as a SharePoint list. Okay, so if I go to here and I can click on this button here, you can see that I've imported. Now, yes, it's accessible because it's in the cloud, it's sitting on an Azure server somewhere, and maybe I can access it like that. But the truth is that for people who are in the field, the idea that they are in the field, perhaps going through the commissioning of that particular piece of equipment, and then at the same time, they're expected to open up this spreadsheet, it doesn't quite make sense. So what I've gone to the trouble of doing is creating a PowerApp. Now, you'll see that the information that it's tapping into is actually the same asset database which I've generated here. But what this allows me to do is to filter this particular list. So you can see here that I've got the ability to apply a filter by level and by the space that I'm working in. Simple as looking at the floor plan, working out which space I'm working in, and then I can choose any of the assets which are in that space. Now, yes, we might say that there's a benefit of having the 3D model to interact with, and there are some ways of doing that as well, of integrating that into, for instance, SharePoint. But the point I'm making here is that if we're just thinking in terms of the asset information for a particular tier 3, tier 4 supplier, this is actually enough for them to do the work that they have to do. All right. What you want to see, of course, is an example of it actually working. So this is actually the app that I've got on my phone. As you can see, I can change between floors. I can also scroll to a particular room, say 2A12, and then I can choose this information here. I might want to make some changes to it. So you can see I can change the manufacturer. I can change the type of model number. Let's do something like changing the date on this particular item. So I can quite easily scroll through to 2021 and then perhaps look at date being June and scroll down to the 30th. Click on OK, and you can see that that's the date information that's gone in, and I can accept that change. Now, remember the asset identifier 402.03329, because when we now go over to here, and I'll just minimize this for now, it's possible to obviously filter by that. And you can see 402.0. We can scroll down to the one that we need. Almost there. Scroll a little bit up. 402.03329. So it's that one. Let's just apply that filter. And you can see that the installation date has been changed to today from what it was before. So what we're able to do is to apply this information, but the main thing that we've got, and remember that a PowerApp, once you've generated it, it's scalable to so many other people. And this is the way in which we can make this capability extend to the tier 3s and the tier 4s and beyond in our supply chain. Now that's quite important. The other piece of the puzzle is, of course, we need to validate and to verify the asset data. So probably we'll be thinking about a time series for COBie completeness and also a time series for COBie compliance. So is the format right? Is the field length right? Again, if I try to do this in Excel, I am very much constrained to discreetly sharing that file to different parties. Whereas if I use Power BI, then the access to this, again, it can be password protected, but the access to this is completely different. So in fact, that's what you can see in this workspace here. It's a COBie completeness, and you can see here that the uniclass information is there, and I can scroll through this information like so. You can see that where it's complied with the values or where it hasn't complied, and then I've got the ability, I can just zoom in here, you can see the time series shows that over time, as we go through the different dates. So essentially this one here on the left hand side is the most up to date, and we can see this time series over time. And the benefit of this is that we can actually have numerous updates to the COBie information that's coming in, and we can check it for compliance in this way by setting up specific rules without needing to invest in a separate and very relatively expensive toolset for that purpose. Equally here, you can see this is one of the dashboards, so we can start from a point here where we started out maybe only the asset type, which is fixed or movable, and the manufacturer is there. There's very little of the other. And we see progressively that more information, perhaps that's been validated and then realized that some of that information needs to be removed. But we're actually seeing these time slices until we get to a position where the data is complete. That is the aspect. And when we think about it, I mean, yes, you have to invest in maybe setting this up, but once you have done it, it's a one-to-many. That the use of measures inside Power BI allows us to scale this tremendously across the supply chain. And then the final piece of this is a tool set called FME Desktop, which has been traditionally used to transform data for GIS purposes, and has a strong history of that. But it allows us, for instance, to view and update COBie parameters in IFC models, so open data structures. We can apply that information in Excel and then update the model. We can also export formatted COBie information from the IFC models. And if we want to scale this, we can, in fact, if we were further up in the supply chain, we could invest in FME Cloud, which allows us to do that. All right, so what does FME Desktop look like? Well, it looks like this. Essentially, at any point, you can basically create what's known as a transformer. So if, for instance, I can simply start typing here, SharePoint, and I've got the ability to read and also write SharePoint lists, for instance. In this particular case, what I've been able to do is to bring in that clinic example of COBie information and to essentially split it into IFC categories, as you can see here. I'll just zoom in a bit just to show you what's possible. If I zoom in here quite closely, you can see I can select the project. And what I've got the ability to do is to view the source data for that project. So it loads up all of the different IFC categories, but it also shows that to me in 3D. So I've got ability to see the model, and I can drill down through the model in the same way. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to have this capability, but it's great to know that you have the ability to take data which has originated maybe in a tool set like Revit, but then bring it in as an open standard into this environment. Yeah, I'm just going to go back to zoom to extent here. Now, what I can also do, as you can see, is to zoom in and zoom out to different aspects of this data set. Do that. And you can see how the COBie information is being developed. So I've got this transform for the facility level. I've got the transform for generating the floors. I've got a set of transformers for generating the space and zone information. I can rename that information to different ways. I can generate the type information, and also all the way down to the component level. Now, the beauty of this is that I've got the ability to not only generate these as run this process directly here, I can also use it to generate the overall process in the cloud, which means that person simply has to input the file and it will generate the COBie information out of that. Now, the end result of that, if I look here at the example, here's what the end result looks like. So as you can see here, we've got our spaces defined, we've got our floors defined, we've got the facility information, we've got the components and the types. Now, I haven't put in actual values for these, but as I update the information as I explained before, then I've got the ability to use this tool set known as FME Desktop to be able to process that information to actually bring in the Excel data without actually using the authoring tool at all. I can do it simply through this. Now, this is the kind of technology I think that we can be looking at in terms of what we called a disruption. Yeah. So let's think about this as I close. Remember, it's the ability to create and collate data. We need simpler tools for that. We can look at simpler tools for validating and verifying that data, and also look at simpler tools to be able to transform and transfer that data so that we can actually get asset data through that. Now, we've only looked at asset information, but there are many other areas that we can look at. But thank you for your time, and I hope you get a chance to view this video, and I'd be grateful and very much interested in your comments. Thanks again. Bye.